All right, in this video, this is probably one of the more technical videos that I've ever done. I've got notes here. I wish I had a teleprompter. This would probably make my life way easier and your enjoyment probably way better. But what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about wireless transmission video. And I'm not going to do this isn't a review on a specific product. This is more an educational video talking about the differences between Wi-Fi versus frame-based videos. So Wi-Fi or packet-based. We'll get into this in a little bit, but that's kind of like your Hollylands and Axoon and all those. And then your frame-based video, which is what Teradek uses. So I'm just gonna talk about some of the differences and kind of the technical behind how each of them are transmitting video, and then just kind of where I see it in production or how I've used it on set. So if that interests you, then just buckle up, maybe grab some coffee or a drink of your choice, whatever, and hopefully this will be informative for you for your next purchasing or renting decision for your next project if the need arises for wireless video transmission. Now, while I'm trying to stay as objective as possible for this video, I do want to thank Teradek for partnering with me on this video. This video would not have been possible without them. They were kind enough to send out a Bolt 6 system for me to test and review and get familiar with the system to make this video and some more content in the future, so be on the lookout for that. But big thank you to Teradek for partnering with me, and not only partnering with me, but just answering my phone calls and my emails and all that, just trying to get as much information as possible so that I can make as an accurate as possible video for the audience. So huge thank you to Teradek for putting up with me with all my questions and for partnering with me to help educate me and as a result you on this topic. Speaking of which, let's explore both approaches to wireless video, starting with Wi-Fi based systems. Now, I've covered a number of different wireless systems on this channel, such as Hollyland, Axoon, and all that, and I'll leave the links to some of those in the description below if you want to check those out. So I've got a lot of experience using those types of transmission systems, and what they all have in common is they are all a Wi-Fi based or packet-based transmission system. So in this approach, the transmitter has a video encoder which first compresses the video, like H.264 or H.265 typically, and then transmits that data into packets to the receiver over a local only Wi-Fi network. The receiver then decodes that video before sending it out. And then the decoder will typically store multiple packets or decoded frames in a buffer to smooth out the signal before outputting the video. And this allows the system to kind of catch up if there's an issue with the network or if there's some sort of interruption or anything like that, so the viewer doesn't notice any kind of dropout or anything like that. Now, one thing I want to mention is channel capacity. The channel capacitors of the capacity that each of these channels, the channel that they're using, has. And one thing that these Wi-Fi or packet-based systems do or not do really is they don't utilize the full capacity of the channel. So if you look at this chart, the actual channel capacity will have dips. That's that squiggly line there at the top. And this happens if someone walks by or the receiver moves to a different location and there's some sort of obstruction. So to be safe, these systems utilize only a small portion of the available channel capacity. Now, this channel capacity is really like how much data you can send. Like the higher the capacity, the higher bit rate that you can send. So if you're only using a small portion of that, you're limiting yourself in a bit rate. And so you're going to have to compress the image, and therefore you're going to lose out on some image quality. Now, in an attempt to achieve better quality, that's where that buffering comes into play. And so when that decoder has that buffer, if there's kind of a drop or dip or anything like that, or any kind of interference, it can kind of pull from that buffer and it looks like nothing has ever happened, like there was no issue. And that's where you introduce a frame delay. So you're already getting a lower bit rate and kind of taking a hit on image quality. And also, when you're using that buffer system, then you're also introducing a frame delay. And that's why you see all of these Wi-Fi based systems like the HoloLand and Axon and all those will always have a frame delay, usually between like 2 to 4, maybe even 5 frames of delay, because of that buffer that it is using to store that frame packet, those decoded frames, so that if there's any kind of dropout, it can pull from that. But it has to do that process kind of in real time, so there's always going to be that delay, if that makes sense. Now, on the other hand, we have a frame-based system, and this is what Teradek uses in their Bolt and A750. It's built around a chipset that uses that entire channel capacity, like on that chart that I just showed, which eliminates the need for buffering, which in turn results in near zero latency and transmits and receives virtually lossless, uncompressed video. Now, it's pretty neat how they do this. It bypasses the buffering using a technology called joint source channel coding. And what it is doing is it is basically splitting the data into layers. So again, here we have that same channel capacity chart, and at the bottom you have the basic layer. This sends completely secured audio and control data like metadata. Now next you have this coarse layer. You can see it's like below the lowest dip in this chart, and this is sending the most significant video information. So basically, like, what visually matters most, like what we're going to notice the most. And then lastly, there's the fine layer. And this is the least significant information from video and every last byte of additional information. And so what this does is this gets you all the way up to that channel capacity. So you're having the clearest image and not having any buffering. So you're not introducing any sort of latency into the system. All right, zero delay sounds like kind of like a marketing buzzword, doesn't it? Well, it kind of is, and it kind of isn't. So I'm going to show you some tests that I did here, and what you're going to notice at first glance is on the Teradek Ace, it does not look like zero delay. And the A750 shares the same wireless technology as found in their higher end Bolt 6 system. So it's a really cool, affordable way to get into it. But I wanted to use the A750 and the Axon CineView Master 4K. I think both systems are great, but I used HDMI both on this test. So first up, we have the Teradek Ace 750, and it does not look zero delay. See that? If we go back when the slate closes and skip ahead frame by frame, we have to skip 4 frames ahead for the monitor to catch up. So that definitely doesn't sound like zero delay. So it's kind of starting to sound like a marketing gimmick. Well, not exactly. You have to peel back the layers and figure out exactly what's going on in the chain to start taking all the variables out. So what I did is I did this test with the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame in an OC, I think it's the G7 7-inch monitor, and ran HDMI out of the cinema camera directly into the monitor. And this test here you can see is when I freeze the frame, you can see there's actually a 0.17 second delay from the action, the actual timer to the field monitor. So to calculate the latency, this is like kind of generally speaking here, this is where this isn't like the most scientific thing in the world, but in this example, we just multiply 0.17 times 23.976, which is the frame rate, and we get 4.08 frames. So let's go back to that slate. Remember that 4 frames that we saw? So in this example, what we're actually seeing is that 4 frames delay isn't actually from the transmission system. It's actually happening either at the monitor or the output of the camera. I'm not sure quite which one is which. All right, now let's look at the Axon CineView Master 4K. So doing the same test, I need to actually skip ahead 6 frames in order to catch up. So if we kind of do the math, what we have 6 frames that we had to do to catch up. You subtract 4 frames from that because we know that that's kind of the baseline from the camera directly to monitor, and that gives you 2 frames. So between the two systems, we're basically getting 0 delay on the Teradek Ace 750 and 2 frames delay on the CineView Master 4K, which is pretty common for Wi-Fi or packet-based systems to have that 2-frame delay. So when you're trying to do these tests, you got to remember that it's not just the wireless transmission system you have to be looking into. You also need to understand if there's any kind of delay directly from your camera to your monitor. And then you'll start to realize and start to know, like, okay, what's the actual delay here? So anytime you add any kind of HDMI or SDI or USB-C video output or anything, usually that's going to introduce some sort of delay. It really doesn't matter on the camera. Usually there's going to be some sort of delay. So utilizing a system that has zero delay or near zero delay is going to really help get you more of a real-time view, as opposed to something that, you know, from like a packet-based system like HoloLens or Axon. All right, now another thing that's really important is image quality when you're monitoring, either directly connected to your monitor or wirelessly transmitting. And we're talking about wireless transmitters in this video. Now I'm going to stick with the Axon CineView Master 4K and the Teradek for this example, and I'm going to use the Teradek Ace in this example because they're both HDMI and both 4K capable. So I wanted to kind of keep this as apples to apples as a comparison, just to show you the differences between the two and kind of how that technology translates into like a real world use case. So both these systems are capable of 4K. So I got my R5 Mark II and got it to output a 4K signal after way too much trial and error trying to figure out this camera. I love this camera, but this camera sometimes makes me so frustrated. Canon, just fix it. Okay, so 4K isn't necessarily super necessary for wireless monitoring or monitoring in general, but you may be in a studio where there's a 4K TV and you just want to send out the best signal possible for your clients to view. Or another example with using 4K is actually even probably more useful is if you are wanting to send it to a video recorder like an Atomos Ninja V or something like that. Well, if you send a 4K signal and it's, you know, a really good clear picture, then you can use that as a backup or just hand that drive right over to an editor if the editor is with you on set, like a small crew, and they can go off and start editing while you are dumping your footage. So there are some uses for transmitting 4K. So with that, what I want to do is kind of show you a comparison between the Teradek and the Axon and show you the image quality differences when sending it into the Atomos Ninja V recording in ProRes HQ. Now, starting off with the A750, to my eyes, it looks really clear, and I have no issues with this, either using it as, you know, a recorded file, like if my card got corrupted, or if I were transmitting this to a monitor for a client monitor view. And I'm not talking like a 7-inch monitor, I'm talking like, you know, a 21-inch monitor or like a bigger TV or something like that. Now switching over to the Axon, and you can see how that compression from the packet-based approach is really degrading the image. There's all sorts, you see all that blocking, and there's also a color shift. For some DOPs and directors and clients, that is just unacceptable. I mean, think of, you know, some projects where the director and the director of photography and the colorist, you know, kind of work all together to create a specific look to have on set, you know, a LUT to view on set. And if you're sending off a signal that throws off the colors and all that, then there are going to be a lot of questions, or there's going to be some very unhappy people on set. Or think of just even your client, like, you know, if your client puts a lot of money into, you know, the set design, or like it's a fashion client and they're showing off, you know, new styles, or if it's a beauty campaign and, you know, you want to make sure that you're showing off like proper skin tones, like all that kind of stuff is really important. And if you have a color shift like that, you're either going to have to answer to the client and explain to them that, oh, it's this thing, blah, blah, blah. And that just kind of shows that like maybe you don't have the right equipment for the job, or it's just a conversation that really is unnecessary. So when I look at these two comparisons, I was actually really surprised when I did this test. I couldn't believe how much better the Teradek looked over the CineView Master 4K. And this is in 4K, so like I would expect to have pretty good results from both transmission systems, and Teradek here was the clear winner. Now, I kind of just want to talk about like how I would use each of these different systems in different environments. So starting up with the Teradek, I would use that for client monitor, just to give them the best monitoring experience, or director's monitor, just to give them the best monitoring experience so that they are seeing exactly what's being captured without any kind of influence on the image or any kind of degradation of the image, or pulling focus. I mean, that's obviously really important. You want to have as little latency as possible, so you're nailing your marks and everything like that. And then for live productions, for live concerts or something like that, a lot of times I'll get hired on to be a part of a live production, and having my Teradek Bolt 6 system is kind of the perfect solution for that, because not only do you get that zero latency and no image quality degradation, but you also are able to utilize 6 gigahertz as opposed to 5 gigahertz or 2.4, which is a lot of what those Wi-Fi based systems use. And the benefit there is you are entering a much less crowded wireless environment, so you're much less likely to have any dropouts or interference or anything like that. Now, when it comes to a Wi-Fi or packet-based type transmission system like the Axoon or Hollylands, I would use those, and I've used those quite a bit for, if I'm doing like a hop from I was just on a shoot where we had a production monitor, just my OC whatever mega 20-inch, whatever the size is, and then there was a monitor outside for kind of the client, but more so just for like reference, just outside of the actual studio, kind of in a common area. And I just sent a signal from the monitor to the TV in there, just so the client or talent or anybody could just kind of see what's going on if we're rolling or anything like that. So that was an instance where using the Axoon was perfectly fine, because it wasn't a color critical, or obviously we didn't care about delay or anything like that. It was just like nice to have another signal to go out. Another thing is like if I'm doing for like gaffers, this is actually really handy for gaffers to have. They don't need zero delay, or they don't usually even need like the best picture possible. Usually they just need something to reference a wireless feed, just so when they're setting up lights, they can have their monitor with them and just do a hop off of somebody else's, so the camera A, or off of a production monitor or something. And this is just really helpful for when you're setting up lights and everything. You don't really have to keep asking the DP or look over at a production monitor or director's monitor or something to get edge of frame or anything like that. You can look at your monitor and only spend a few $100, and you don't need super high quality image quality or no latency. Like, that doesn't really matter. So those kinds of things, like that kind of scenario is like a perfect scenario where like just go ahead and save your money and get a cheaper Wi-Fi type system and be off to the races. So yeah, those are some scenarios where I would use each of the different systems. Your mileage may vary, and these are not even a few $100s is not cheap for a lot of people, and this isn't one of those items that you absolutely need. So just keep that in consideration. If you have a project coming up where you need wireless, that doesn't mean you need to necessarily go out and purchase a bunch of different wireless units. Consider renting and see what works for your production. And if you end up wanting to purchase in the future, then at least you have experience with different systems to know exactly what fits best for your workflow. Well, that was an insanely long video. My voice is about to go out, and I am going to be surprised if you're still here. But if you are, thank you for watching. and hopefully by now I've earned a subscription from you if you're not already subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button down below, give it a thumbs up, share it with the world, and go be nice to somebody today because they deserve it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.